Imagine a 22-year-old college student living alone in a small apartment. It's 2 in the morning on a Thursday. The building is silent, and they're distracted by a phone screen in bed. In this environment, a locked door serves as the final, absolute boundary of the home. It is the physical line that separates the safety of a private room from the public space of the hallway. To maintain that boundary, we use the peephole. It is a simple piece of glass designed for a single purpose: to see without being seen, allowing us to identify a threat before we ever have to face it. Our sense of security at night depends on this technology working without error. We trust that if something is standing in that hallway, the lens will show it to us. At 2:13 a.m., that trust is tested by 3 slow knocks. They are deliberate, heavy, and they shatter the silence of the apartment. The student walks to the door and looks through the glass, expecting to find a neighbor or a late-night delivery worker. But the hallway is empty. A knock requires a knocker. When the eyes find nothing to account for what the ears clearly heard, the brain struggles to reconcile the two. The certainty of the physical world has been replaced by a contradiction. An invisible presence is often more distressing than a visible one. Without a visual target to focus on, the body remains in a state of high alert, unable to decide whether to hide, fight, or wait. The silence returns, only to be broken again. 3 more knocks hit the wood, louder this time, and sounding as if the person is standing inches away from the student's face. They check the peephole immediately. The hallway is still vacant. There is no movement and no sound of footsteps retreating down the stairs. This top-down view shows how a standard peephole projects a cone-shaped field of vision into the hallway. The curved glass creates massive dead zones on either side. By pressing flat against the wall next to the frame, an intruder remains completely invisible. The architecture of the building has been turned into a weapon. The very tool designed to provide security has been transformed into a cloaking device for the person outside. The student steps back and checks their phone. A motion alert from the apartment's security app has appeared on the screen. We often assume that digital security will solve the limitations of analog glass. The expectation is that a high-definition camera with a wider field of view will finally reveal what is hiding in the shadows. The student opens the live video feed. For several seconds, the screen shows the same empty hallway as before. Nothing moves. Then, a man's head and shoulders slowly lean into the side of the frame. He is smiling, looking directly into the camera lens. This reveals that the digital lens has its own boundaries. It is not a window into the hallway, but a framed stage with edges that can be mapped and avoided. The man wasn't caught by the camera. He knew exactly where the frame ended, and he stood just outside of it until he chose to be seen. While staring into the lens, the man silently mouths a command. There is no sound on the recording, but his lips clearly form the words, "Open the door." Watching a camera feed usually suggests the observer is the one in control, but here, the intruder is the one directing the encounter, using the camera as a medium to deliver a message. He moved from the shadows into the center of the frame only when he was ready to speak. He understood the camera's blind spots and used that knowledge to ensure his appearance would have the maximum impact. The police are called, but by the time they arrive, the hallway is empty. There are no signs of a struggle and no physical evidence that anyone was ever there. Smart cameras and digital alerts offer the promise of protection, but they do not physically stop a person from standing in the dark. Instead, they provide a front-row seat to our own stalking, turning us into an audience for the person on the other side. Imagine you are 22 years old, living alone in a small apartment near your college. It's 2 a.m. on a Thursday, and the rest of the building has been asleep for hours. It's that deep, heavy quiet that only exists in a large complex when hundreds of units are simultaneously at rest. In that environment, a locked front door serves a dual purpose. It secures the physical perimeter, and it establishes a strict psychological boundary separating your private, controlled sanctuary from the unpredictable public space of the hallway. You're in bed, watching YouTube, settling in for the night. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the silence breaks. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echo from your front door. Your brain immediately scrambles to rationalize the anomaly. You tell yourself it's probably a neighbor who got off on the wrong floor, or a harmless mistake. We instinctively try to force a mundane explanation onto a sudden disruption. You walk over and peer through the peephole, expecting to see a confused tenant. Instead, you see nothing, a completely empty hallway. Your ears heard the physical impact against the wood, but your eyes see total isolation. This creates immediate cognitive dissonance. Your senses are directly contradicting each other. The brain struggles to process an auditory event of that magnitude when visual confirmation is entirely denied. Our feeling of safety inside our homes relies heavily on our ability to observe and verify threats. When you can hear a physical presence but cannot verify it with your eyes, the illusion of isolation collapses. Then the knocking returns. 3 more strikes, noticeably louder, hitting the door right in front of your face. You immediately check the peephole again, but the corridor remains completely deserted. To understand how someone can strike a door and remain entirely unseen, we have to look at a core structural vulnerability built into almost every residential unit: the optical blind spot. This diagram shows a standard peephole. It permits a narrow, cone-shaped field of vision. Because that cone is rigid, an individual can evade it. By pressing flat against the exterior wall, a person exists in the negative space, using your own door for concealment. An analog peephole gives a false impression of omniscience. In reality, it establishes a predictable and highly exploitable geographic zone where a predator can hide right next to you. You step back from the door, your primary method of observation compromised. Then your phone vibrates. A notification from your apartment's smart security app reads, "Motion detected outside your door." You open the live camera feed. For a few agonizing seconds, the digital view matches the peephole. The hallway appears completely vacant. Then the geometry shifts. A man slowly leans into view from the edge of the frame. He stands there, smiling directly into the camera lens. He knows exactly where the camera is. The prolonged silence, combined with his unnatural, locked-in smile, triggers an intense psychological response. He is fully aware he is being observed. The camera feed doesn't capture audio, but he whispers anyway. Watching the screen, you clearly read his lips forming the words, "Open the door." If it weren't for the secondary digital lens mounted at a different angle, the physical design of the building would have kept you entirely blind to a predator standing less than a foot away. You call the police immediately, but by the time officers arrive to investigate, the hallway is empty again. The timeline resets, leaving no physical evidence that anyone was ever there. Incidents like this force us to rethink the purpose of a front door. A thick piece of wood blocks physical entry, but the hardware installed inside that wood serves as an information barrier. This diagram illustrates the stark contrast between the two systems. On the left, the traditional peephole restricts your awareness to a narrow tunnel. On the right, the modern smart camera lens captures a panoramic view, requiring total situational awareness of the corridor. Intruders don't always need to break down the door. By manipulating lines of sight and staying within architectural shadows, they control the flow of information, deciding exactly what you are allowed to see. Think about the space immediately outside your own front door. If someone stood perfectly flat against the wall, inches from the frame, would your current security setup be able to see them? The physical threat vanished before the police arrived. The true, lasting vulnerability is realizing that a standard peephole, a tool designed to provide safety, actually dictates a massive architectural blind